of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Chistero. Chapter 54. Talks, Part 4. When 1400 rolled around, they decided to conduct the witness statement and informal interview in the cafe proper. Santa Peter had left, now masa had arrived, and iced coffee and cream puff shared out. He'd let the people taking part to the study area the tots and middle schoolers used. Tomura was sat on one side with him and Dabi either side of him, while Tsugarami Genji, Sir Nadai, who was there to collect any other information he and his agency could use to foil Garaki and any other pawns Shigemaki might have in play, and his dark-haired self-defense student. He'd placed a comforting hand on the decay quirk user's shoulder and had allowed Gigi out of the enclosure. The old cat was sat in the teen's lap, his small imperious face gazing dispassionately at the visiting men, whilst Dabi leaned towards his partner, his arms crossed, and expression resolved. Tomura-kun, the lieutenant began, a fancy audio recorder cum lie detector resting between them. Thank you for agreeing to talk with us today, especially given the events of this morning, he offered. As a police force officer, I must advise you that you're not under caution and that you're free to remove yourself from this interview at any time, he said. However, I must also advise you that anything you do say here is being recorded, and we may approach you again for further details if we feel that is warranted. All right. Nodding, his skin cracking a little, Shouta gave the shoulder he grasped a gentle squeeze.
Okay. I would like to start with how you came to know the man known as Shigaraki, also known as Orphan,
the oldest of their assembled group again.
And please take your time.
God, rehearing the events his youngest teen had told him through his fear, tears, and heartache only a few days ago had been a sobering experience. The lieutenant had let him talk. Now Masa was full of sympathy. Sir Nida, however, had become progressively less neutral. In fact, when he'd sneak glances at him, he'd watched as the former sidekick, a true hero in his own right, had gone from worried to angry to concerned to shocked.
If I may,
he cut in, his golden eyes softening when Tomura, who'd stiffened, Dabi had shifted in his seat. Both were wary. Looked to him, he adjusted his glasses and leaned a little closer to the desk.
Do you know what Shigaraki's quirk allows him to do? I'm not sure what it's called, the youth responded. But I know that it allows him to take people's powers, he said. Well, I'm not sure if that applies to mutations, but emitter types are something he can steal with just a touch. I've seen him do it. He can dish them out, too. When he wants,
he furthered after a swallow.
Yes, that's right,
the green-haired man nodded.
Tomura, based on what you've told us this far, I believe that it was Shigaraki who gave you the quirk you have now,
he stated, his words causing the teen to blink, Dabi to huff, and him to grit his teeth. That's what he'd been thinking, but...
Why?
He heard himself say, the group turning to him, his brows furrowing.
Please, don't get me wrong,
he murmured, his gaze meeting the shortest boy's.
We love you regardless of whether this power is yours or not, and you have come a long way in terms of accepting it, controlling it, and forgiving yourself.
He praised those crimson eyes misting.
And we will always love you,
he continued, before turning back to the tallest member of their group.
What would drive him to target a child, let alone a quirkless one?
He asked, Izuku's innocent face flashing through his mind. God, if that motherfucker had wanted to... He could have... He'd let that bastard near Inko's precious son. How we longed to kick that crusty old fiend once more. Harder this time, regardless of whether the bro's assumptions were right or not.
That is where I'm drawing a blank myself,
Sir Nida admitted, his tone saddened.
As cruel, unusual, and deranged as Alpha One is, well, as far as we're aware, he's only ever recruited adults or created the servants he wants.
He sighed, his shoulders deflating slightly.
If it's not too personal to ask, Tomura-kun, what is your family name? I'm not meaning to pry,
he stated, those golden eyes meeting his. He'd been assured that anything more personal wouldn't be questioned. However, if the youngest teen didn't mind revealing such a thing, then...
It's just, well, he's as old as he is petty,
he acknowledged.
You may have been targeted for a reason, he added quietly, and as much as I'd like to think that wasn't the case,
I believe it is a train of thought worth pursuing, if you're comfortable." Feeling the other tense beneath his hand, he was about to tell him that it was all right, that he didn't have to share anything he didn't want to.
My real name was Jamora Tenko.
The boy said, his mouth opening again, went to everyone's surprise. Sir Nighteye was standing, a hand clutching over his heart, his immaculate hair disheveled.
Jamora,
he breathed, his head shaking lightly.
Sorry, please excuse me for a moment.
He stated hurriedly, a lean hand reaching for his phone as he strode toward the cafe's main entrance and exited. Leaving the rest of them sat there bewilderedly, while Sansa, who had been dutifully set in Dabi's preferred booth, blinked up from his laptop with a looking to Sagarame, who seemed just as bewildered as the rest of them. They then watched whilst the pro hastily walked to his car and threw himself inside, the phone pressed desperately to his ear as he spoke.
"Well, I'm not quite sure what this could mean, everyone,"
he managed. It wouldn't do for all of them to start freaking out over the usually stoic hero's behavior, would it?
"Perhaps we should take a short break."
To see All Might, virtually healed, but how? His body speedily walking across the sidewalk, disguised in a baseball cap, sunglasses, and lightweight trench coat was surreal. However, considering they'd all faced off against the number one villain only a few hours ago, he supposed that surrealness was a relative, wasn't it? Stranger still, it had only taken him 10 minutes to arrive. His former sidekick a beat behind him, the pair of them looking around, no doubt checking for the media. Word had gotten around about a sensational smash-up between our legendary number one and unknown forces of evil. Really? And it was all over the TV. Before Sir Nighteye locked the door behind him. Watching them, they looked fraught, tense, anxious. Not good. A quiet, worried voice in the back of his mind started to mutter about what he'd do if they wanted to try and take Tomra away. For some reason. He wouldn't allow it, of course. Regardless of their friendship, the teen had been through enough, hadn't he? And now his body standing between the service bar's currently empty display case and the second booth, his eyes narrowed to the point where even Sansa, who'd been busily working away for once, had noticed to stop them in their tracks. He felt the tension in his shoulders double. He was glad that he decided to intercept them, though. He could feel his teen's distress from here.
He didn't like this one bit.
"Shouta-kun, please forgive my intrusion,"
the bronzed man greeted with a bow, the reddened lines around his own neck and face virtually gone. It was miraculous, really! Those blue eyes meeting his briefly before moving to his wards. Both still sat quietly talking, fussing over Gigi, and watching their exchange. The two police force officers with them also seemed bemused.
"You're not intruding, but all of this,"
he said with emotion to his incognito outfit,
is freaking me out. I mean, why are you here? I thought you'd be resting and lying low to avoid the meteor vultures gunning for you,"
he continued quickly, his heart in his throat.
"Tomra is my nephew. Anyway."
Blinking? Because that was not what he'd expected the other to whisper, his tone pensive regardless of the guilt and hope pouring across his face, Sir Nighteye seeming similarly distressed. The cafe owner could have collapsed on the spot in relief. God! But, wait, he heard himself say, his brows reaching for his hairline. What?
Would we be able to speak to him privately?
The leaner of the heroes asked, those eyes sharp, his regal face also stricken. However, a flicker of hurt coursing through him. Illogical, he found his posture straightening. It wasn't that he didn't want them to talk to the boy for any kind of nosy, self-interested reason, not at all. He'd promised Tomra that he'd be with him, that he and Dabi would be at his side no matter what, and yet, from the distress, uncertainty, regret, and remorse, he could see weighing All Might's massive shoulders down. Those sunglasses pulled away to reveal eyes swirling with quiet pain. Damn it all. How could his heart want to hug the big lug in one instance, to comfort him, and want to push him out to the cafe in the other, his desire to protect his youngest lodger fighting tooth and nail against his instincts that told it to trust the blonde, to help him. Fuck.
Well, that depends.
he returned, his voice quiet but tone resolute, his eyes shifting to Sansa, who also blinked at him, standing his ground, his fur standing on end, before he looked away with a swallow, fingers quietly yet rapidly tapping away. So, this wasn't something to do with the police force, then?
Shouta, please. If Tormund wants to talk with you, then you can.
He furthered, his arms folded, the glinting obsidian of his eyes locked with neon blue once more, his expression firm.
If he doesn't, I expect you to respect and accept that,
he stated, his tone brokering no argument.
Can you promise me that?
He asked, his demeanor softening despite himself. God, he felt like he was kicking a puppy, But he needed to stand his ground. He needed to make sure he wasn't misplacing his trust. Because regardless of his own feelings for the man looming over him, he had the trust he'd built up between himself and the young men he couldn't love anymore if they were related by blood. Not that that mattered.
Of course, Shouta-kun, you have my word, and if you would, I would like you to be a part of...
Yagi! The other hero breathed, his tone peppered with warning as he leaned forward, those cautious eyes narrowing at the cat-quirked officer before quickly assessing the windows. There were a few MU students milling around with Centipede and Bubble Girl redirecting them, and thankfully no one else. His frown darkening. Yup.
Has he not given us his trust, Mirai?
The blonde asked his friend, the eerie quiet of the cafe, which should be bustling with regulars. His stats would be with them in just over an hour, too. He'd wanted to talk to all of them quietly about this morning's events, just in case the media did come knocking, broadening out between them. Sensing the building tension, Sansa continued to stare avidly at his screen, while his eyebrows ventured on their quest to join his hairline. God, he's never been a fan of riddles or secrets, and if the shaky breath Mirai had just released was anything to go by, then this, whatever this was going to be a doozy, wasn't it?
You're right, of course,
the other eventually conceded, whilst giving him, of all things, a bow.
Forgive me, Shouta, he said. It is not my intention to discredit you or question your honor, he promised. When you reach the level of security needed to protect someone like All Might, keeping a tight grip on information, knowing who has access to such critical things is...
He sighed, humming in the back of his throat. Shouta nodded and then guided them down to the study area. Whatever the pair were talking about, it sounded serious. Much more serious than he'd been originally considering. This didn't seem like it was anything to do with the accident his youngest teen had lived through. At their approach, Tsugarame stood with his protege. They both bowed, grabbed up their equipment, and made to walk away.
Thank you for your
time, all of you, the lieutenant told him and his wards as he walked past Dabi, suspicious, Tomura, concerned, to retake his seat.
Have a pleasant afternoon, and we'll be in touch should we have any further inquiries.
He finished with a bow that was mimicked by Nao Masan. Returning the gesture, he then watched as they approached tabby-headed officer, and after a few quick words, the cat-quirked man was whisking up his technology and swiftly heading out with them. Sir Night-Eye had strangely followed the law enforcers to the door, apologized to them, and locked the cafe's door when they'd left.
Okay,
he stated, his tone and face very much nonplussed.
What's going on?
He asked, his hackles braked a little. They just dismissed the police as though their authority was beyond question. For all he knew, it probably was. It was a little worrying, wasn't it, that the Hero Society could overrule the police. This explained, however, why so many of the pros, the top 10 in particular, were so cocky and wandered around like gods amongst men. He, and maybe upon reflection this had been stupid of him, hadn't thought that All Might and Sir Night-Eye were like that. He hoped that they weren't, but he'd had his eyes opened today about a lot of things. The scales of power in this world, with quirks at the heart of it, the ruthless depths of evil that could exist, what went on behind the smiles and flashing cameras he'd always abhorred. The way that the blonde, usually so animated in one way or another, was just standing there, it was putting him on edge.
Gentlemen, the future seer said quietly, this meeting is quite unprecedented for many, many reasons.
He sighed, his brown leather briefcase moving to rest upon the table, his deft fingers opening it with a loud cracking snap of dual locks.
And Although I cannot force the issue, I was hoping that you would sign these gag orders. What? Huh?
You're right, that won't be necessary,
All Might said, and why were the pair name-dropping all of a sudden? Wasn't that dangerous? Sure, the police force had scoured their home, removed all the bugs Shigaraki had somehow taped around the area, but they'd only known each other for 2, going on for 3 months. Shouldn't they... Fine. The slender hero chuffed his body, pouring into the seat which now Masa had rested in, a long drawn-out sigh leaving him as he crossed his arms, a flash of light crossing his glasses. But I'm not covering for you when Gran Torino gets wind of this.
What?
I understand.
The blonde managed to get out, and when he turned to face them, his iconic smile had been replaced by an all-too-real expression of sadness, worry,
Top Raccoon.
grief. Shit. By 1500, Shouta was just about ready to drag all of them upstairs, put them to bed, and claim that everything they'd gone through today was just some trippy, terrible fever dream brought on by a faulty ingredient he'd somehow whipped into their food.
Her name was Nana, and she was the mother I never had.
Because this was insanity, madness, and worst of all,
Trained daily. She taught me how to smile and made me the man I am today.
he could believe it. He could believe all of it.
Married to a wonderful, caring man who loved and accepted her. They were, from what she told me, very happy together.
And as he sat in the still, cool, quiet atmosphere of the home he built for himself and his found family, he hugged Tomra close, the arm he'd looped around those fragile shoulders, allowing a hand to reach Dabi's shoulder, as the three of them listened to the tale pouring out of
Yagi Toshinori!
Dear God, he trusted them that much. Like a flood.
But, learning of this, Shigaraki struck. He killed Nana's husband but spared his son. A son who she placed into foster care for his safety and protection. A son who I never met, who was 10 years older than me, who I'd promised never to seek out for his continued protection. A son who they'd named Kotaro.
Feeling the decay quirk user jolt against him, Gigi chuffed at his distress. The old cat meowing in question. Shouta released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, while Dabi muttered something under his breath.
That boy grew up to be your father, did he not, Goku?
Don't call me that.
The teenager wheezed, his eyes growing shut.
He was so cruel to me. He hated heroes. He hated you.
He breathed, his teeth gritting.
She chose you over him. I never understood him saying that when he was drunk, but now...
He managed before swiping in his eyes.
There are no words, Tomra. No, there are not enough words in this world for me to express just how truly, deeply sorry I am.
The blonde stumbled, his eyes glittering with tears. He shrugged Mirai's hand away when the other tried to console him. All for one, he thought, you hideous, terrible monster! His mind added, his own eyes closing when the 16-year-old sobbed into his shoulder, and Dabi, his body becoming progressively more tense with protective fury, rubbed at his back, a flicker of blue flame haloing his hair. He needed to defuse the situation.
I understand if you hate me too, Tomra.
Shit! Reopening his eyes, the look of heartbreak upon the number 1 pro's face tearing at him in ways he couldn't express. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, when...
Hate you.
Shit! Then his body moving to help the youngest of their gathering to sit up properly, his admittedly shaking hands reaching for some of the napkins he always had on him to offer around. Shouta sent a silent prayer up to any benevolent deity who might be listening. There had to be a way to heal these people, all of them precious to him.
If Sho has taught me anything, it's that the past doesn't matter.
He murmured those softly spoken words like a punch to his gut, the sense of pride he felt in the young man who'd been to hell and back again.
Spanking! You didn't kill my grandfather. You didn't abandon my father. What's happened to me has happened.
He sighed.
How can I hate you when when you stopped him, when you saved Show, when you listened to us and took us seriously," he continued with a sniff. "When you look even more upset than I feel, Mr. Smiles all the time."
He tried to chuckle. Toshinori, however, looked flabbergasted. Madai, similarly, was wiping at his own ice-falls Dabi, finally deflated with a shaky exhale. Knowing his laughter the way he did, he was sure he was gearing up to fight the men in front of them, and, regardless of their combined strength, Shouta knew who he'd have placed money on. The flame quirk user felt truly and loved deeply, because he was just that amazing. In the face of defending his partner, they wouldn't have stood a chance. God, he was so glad that it hadn't come to that.